Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be another entry into my Ask an Archaeologist series. I'm going to be interviewing my very good friend, Dr. Andrew Danielson. Andrew and I go all the way back to Hebrew 101, a class that we studied for our first year of our undergraduate degree at Laurier. He was part of the crew that I went to Jordan with in 2010 and 2012, and in 2010, he was actually one of the friends that I then traveled on to Israel and Egypt with. Once he finished his degree at Laurier in Near Eastern Archaeology, like myself, he went on to study for a master's in Syro-Palestinian archaeology at the University of Toronto, followed by a PhD in the Levantine archaeology at UCLA in California. Today's interview is going to cover a wide range of topics as per usual, from what drew him to archaeology and why he pursued this particular path, to what it was like starting a family while still studying for his PhD, and advice that he has for anybody that wants to pursue perhaps a similar path to his own. Please support my channel by giving me a subscribe and hitting the bell notification button so you know whenever I put out new videos. Without further ado, let's dig into the interview. Welcome to my channel, Andrew. Long time no see, except we Zoomed a couple days ago.
It's a pleasure to be here, Rachel.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here and chat to you. You are my first male guest on my channel, actually, so congratulations on that. We're going to just jump right into the first question, which is kind of standard what I ask everyone. What inspired you to study archaeology?
I imagine my story is probably similar to most people's and very blasé. I was always interested in the ancient world, having a Sunday school background, learning about ancient Israel, but also ancient Egypt and the Mayans. And then from a very young age, I started reading everything I could on whatever civilization or time period was not the present. I guess from a very young age, I couldn't get enough of it and kept chasing that high of trying to find out what life was like in different parts of the world at different times.
So how did you then find out about like archaeology being a thing at university that you could study, and like deciding to study that as opposed to something else like accounting?
I'll have to say that, my introduction to archaeology formally and studying it and then moving down this career path to get to the place that I've come was a little bit more haphazard. I was always interested in it. And I was always, reading about it and learning about it and watching whatever movies and shows I could, but actually choosing formally to go down that path at university, I did more on a whim. I think, like most students, when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I applied to a history program. I applied to a psychology program. I think, a sociology or an anthropology program, just kind of across the board. I saw Laurier's archaeology program. I'm like, hey, that sounds cool, when I was applying. And then when I got in and actually had to make a decision, that it always intrigued me. And then, once I started, like so many of us, I couldn't stop.
So your specialism is specifically in Levantine archaeology. That's like what your PhD is in. So why did you decide to pursue that specifically instead of, say, like the Mayans or Egypt?
I liked many different regions, and I was actually very intrigued by Egypt through a significant part of our undergrad. We took many of the same courses in Egyptology together, many of the same classes in the ancient Near East. I think broadly speaking, I was interested in all of whatever we could get in the ancient Near East. Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Levant, Turkey, whatever we really had access to. I was also, on the side, very interested in the Mayans in Mesoamerica and Incans in South America. But based on the courses that we had available to us at Laurier, we were really pushed into the ancient, or not pushed, I was sucked into, I should say, the ancient Near Eastern world. And then I think the decision to really commit to the Levant happened. I think we went to the same first field school in Jordan. And then once I excavated in Jordan within the Levant, then, you're just committed.
Gone.
Can't turn back from that. Yeah.
I remember Dr. Davio, I think it was our first summer in Jordan, when I was like digging something and she was like standing over me, watching me do it. She was like, "It's addicting, isn't it?" I was just like, yes. No truer words have been spoken.
That's true. And it's not just it's the archaeology too, but then, the people, the language and the culture and the thirst to travel and to see new things and then to experience desert life. It's all interwoven together with that archaeology.
So when we were at university together, as I have said before on this channel, we had to do some interesting language requirements for our degree. So year one was Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, which is the class that bonded and introduced us as we all suffered together. trying to conjugate and learn an entire alphabet, new language and grammatical system within like a semester. After that, we all then went on to do Babylonian 101, where we all learned cuneiform and everything. And so after those 2 years of required languages, I think the majority of the rest of us actually dropped it because it wasn't within our interest, but you actually continued taking those languages. So tell us a little bit more about that. Did you ever think about perhaps pursuing a career in languages, or is that something that went through to your PhD?
As your viewers know, we certainly did get introduced to each other and to language in Hebrew 101 or whatever that class was called. And yeah, I really did enjoy looking at the language and trying to figure out the puzzle of what it how it functions and how we can really learn about that in these ancient societies through the way not only the text that they write, but also the way that language structures your orientation, your sense of place within the world around you, how it orients thought, and the different intricacies of ancient cultural practices that you can tease out from different texts through knowing the language. So yeah, we did Hebrew together. And then we did some Akkadian, looking at some of the Babylonian and Assyrian dialects in undergrad. And I did enjoy language, and so I actually never really gave it up. And so where I didn't do my PhD necessarily in a traditional way. Many students, when they do an archaeology degree, will go through an anthropology department. And what I did instead was I entered a department that was more regionally focused. So where I did my master's and my PhD was a department called Near Eastern Languages and Cultures. And so we specifically focus on, this region of the Middle East. And then within that, cultural studies focus, my focus and my specialty was as an archaeologist, but also in tandem learning the languages and the literature of these ancient people groups from this region. So we're working in, historic periods of time where there's tons of texts that we can study and that we really have to digest in order to fully understand these ancient societies that we're working with. And so in my master's and PhD, I didn't really pursue Akkadian too much further, but I really jumped into Aramaic. And then different dialects, more Hebrew, but then also the different dialects of the region of the Levant. So looking at, Ugaritic, Phoenician, and they're all very similar to Hebrew. So if you learn one, or your knowledge of Hebrew rather can translate into these other different dialects quite easily, but really digging into the different dialects of the regions. And this actually formed a significant component of my dissertation as well. Actually working on a project now where I'm looking at the names from this period of time, and based on the linguistic structure of the names, we can see indications of Hebrew or indications of Arabic or indications of Aramaic or even Egyptian, all within this one region. And so just by using some of the inscriptional data that we have, small little receipts or inscriptions or names on ostraca or on seals, we can really see how interconnected and how diverse the social landscape of this region really was, just based on this one piece of data. It's really quite cool.
So after our time at Laurier, you then went to U of T to get a master's. And then after that, you went to UCLA and you've just finished your PhD last year. So tell us a little bit more about your PhD and like your thesis topic, because I know that, as we were saying in our Zoom call, not many people get to talk about their thesis after it's been written. So tell us all about it.
I should say in the American system, we call it a dissertation. So if I say a dissertation, same thing as the UK thesis. But there's a joke that no one will actually read your dissertation except for yourself. And if you're lucky, your committee. The topic that I focused on, I'm looking at the region we call the Southern Levant. This is present day Southern Israel, Palestine, and Southern Jordan. And little bits into northwestern Saudi Arabia and a little bit into the Sinai of Egypt. And the period I was focusing on was roughly the year 750 to about 550 BC, so about a 200-year time period. And what I was specifically looking at was cross-cultural interaction between a kingdom called Judah that existed in southern Israel and Palestine and a kingdom called Edom that existed in southern Jordan, and really looking at interconnections between these two regions and between the two peoples. And there's a ton of evidence of interconnections and even migrations, and really, complex patterns of social entanglement is what I call it in my dissertation. And so a lot of this is set within the context of, broader picture empire All of these regions are controlled by Assyria and then by Babylon. But also there's a really interesting part of the story that entails long distance economic exchange. There's actually a huge and major, really lucrative trade network that extends all the way to southern Arabia, present-day Yemen, that's bringing really expensive aromatics and spices into the Levant, into the Near East, and a huge branch of this trade network passes directly through this region. And so a lot of what I was looking at was movement along these trade networks and how that plays out in the social life of the inhabitants of this region.
Oh, cool. How did you choose that topic?
First of all, I was always interested in Jordan, and I've actually never excavated in this, southern region of Edom or this southern region of Judah that I was focusing on. But I was always intrigued by this southern landscape within Jordan. It's absolutely phenomenal if you get a chance to visit it. Really, really, really breathtaking. But I think what really sucked me in was some of the scholarship that had been done on it. So a lot of the older interpretations from the 80s and 90s really focused on invasion as one of the explanations for why we have archaeological material culture from southern Jordan in southern Israel, this bleeding into modern ideas of hostility between different regions and then retroprojecting that into the past. And when I was developing this topic, there was some really impactful, a few articles that came out that pointed out that, hey, this isn't really what was happening. Things are much, much more complex. First we see people interacting, it's not all happening at once as you would expect in an invasion, but it's actually happening over a span of about 150 years. The material culture we see isn't really evidence of an army. It's, evidence of families, of people, of women, of, mercenaries, perhaps, of traders. It's a much more complex picture. And then just as I was, wandering down this path, there was the publication of a whole ton of sites that had this material culture. So it was essentially, a gift. All of this data that needed to be analyzed and needed to be talked about in a more complicated way. And then I was intrigued by it. So it all kind of fell into place in the end.
That's really interesting. I don't think I'd really known about your topic in that way. You've spoken about it, but I've never gotten such an in-depth explanation before. As you mentioned, you didn't actually do field work for your PhD, but outside of Jordan, where we actually excavated together twice, you have also excavated in Israel at some other sites. So what was that like?
You mentioned a really important point there. One of the keys to any of you who might be interested in doing your PhD is to never do your PhD on material that's not already published or that has already been excavated. There's all these horror stories of people who start a project, but they have to excavate to get the data, and then things slow down the excavation, and it can be very challenging. But yeah, I did spend a number of years working in Israel, specifically at the site of Jaffa, on the south side of Tel Aviv, right on the Mediterranean coast. So my advisor was running a multi-year project excavating there. Most of our excavation was on a late Bronze Age New Kingdom Egypt garrison in southern Canaan. So we got to explore some of the ideas of empire and then resistance, local Canaanite resistance to that empire through the lens of what we were excavating at Jaffa. And then I also worked a bit on some of the Persian period and the Hellenistic period remains that we have at the site. Our big picture project there was in part trying to work through older excavated materials that had been excavated in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then integrating all of that old data that was never published with our own new excavations and new investigations of all that material in the museum. So it was a very complicated project. Every period of history is attested at Jaffa, to varying degrees.
Yeah. So the field school was being run by your supervisor. Would you say that it was very similar in style to what we did in Jordan, or was it kind of different?
It's one of the bigger differences we had working at Jaffa, and this was just a site-specific thing, was we were trying to be all digital within the field. So we had this goal of having no paper products in the field. So we had, iPads, and we were tapping into our database in real time as we were excavating. So that was a really interesting component. And, something that was new to me was, the whole digital thrust. It was super cool. I mean, it was really challenging in the field. You lose your data, your internet connection, for example, and then, you have to pause and wait and things like that. But overall, I mean, getting all of that information into our database in real time was really cool, and allowing then after the field season or in the evenings, you could go through and all your data was already input. You can export, whatever data you need and revise and refine it.
That's the way things are going. But like it's British archaeology is finally starting to catch up to that. It's been a process for them to just even create the app. I mean, obviously it's a bit of a different situation because they're working on lots of different sites of different time periods all over the country and whatnot. Whereas, Jaffa is just like a single site.
Yeah, this is a great question you raise. What app, what program do we use to record the data? And I know with a number of different excavations, they're experimenting, with different forms, whether we input it directly, first into the iPad and then have it upload to the cloud later when we might have a more secure connection. Because, many sites that we work at, Medania, for example, we don't have any Wi-Fi or data out there. But if you're working in urban Tel Aviv, it's a little bit of a different situation. Yeah. So what we did at Jaffa actually wasn't, we didn't have to develop our own app. We'd already been recording our data into a bigger database called Ochre, which is housed out of the University of Chicago. Mm. And so using this database, essentially what we had to do on our iPads was, as long as we had a Wi-Fi connection, we could just be working in real time in our actual physical database. So we didn't actually have to develop an app or something, where we could store data and then upload it to the cloud later, or standardize, our terminology and things like that. It was essentially already created, which was quite convenient.
Moving on. So you finished your PhD, congratulations. And now you are you've entered the world of postdoctoral working. So can you tell us a bit more about what your career's been since you finished your PhD and what you kind of envision going forward and what you're pursuing?
So I graduated in June of 2020 in the height of the pandemic, which wasn't really an ideal time to graduate, as, jobs that had been posted to apply for kept getting canceled. So the job market at the moment is a little bit challenging, at least as, globally, we all try to navigate what's happening in the moment of the pandemic and then seeing what life looks like after that. But what I've been doing is I was fortunate to get some contracts teaching here at UCLA. So I actually have remained in Los Angeles, and I'm teaching a number of courses, carrying on, with a number of the courses that I was a TA for. Now I'm the professor for, I guess. I don't really call myself that necessarily. Still working, teaching a number of the same courses, Ancient Near East. I'm currently, actually one of the current classes that I'm really excited about is called Age of Empires. And I'm looking at, power and warfare in ancient society, specifically in the late Bronze Age and Iron Age in the Ancient Near East, New Kingdom Egypt, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians. Doing a lot of teaching, and then also trying to, carry on with my own research, working on a series of different projects, and then trying to transform some elements that I've argued in my dissertation into a series of articles and hopefully a book as well.
Are you looking to then pursue basically like the route of academia? So like getting a teaching position at a university, like that's the part of the job that you want to do, and then like, going to excavations in the summer where you can bring your friend from the UK who has lots of excavation experience to help teach all your students?
Ideally, yeah, that's currently what I'm, the big picture goal in life is, the career in academia, teaching, research, excavating in the summers is the goal.
So I thought it was really interesting that out of all of my friends who've done PhDs, you were the only one who had a child while you were doing it. As we all know, children are quite a handful, especially when they're younger, and PhDs are also quite a handful. So was that something that I guess placed extra pressure on the situation, or like how did you balance fatherhood and having to write a dissertation and teaching and all that stuff?
It's been an adventure. I would first of all say children are a handful, but they're also an absolutely beautiful and delightful handful. So I wouldn't say my life has been brought down at all by this. It's only been improved, except my sleep quality, which we were talking about earlier. So yeah, we did, my partner, my wife and I, we had a kid, a beautiful little girl. Essentially, I'd had my dissertation all outlined and I was only, working towards the writing phase. So most of my time was quite flexible. I was doing a lot of work from home. I was still a teaching assistant at the university, so going a couple days a week. But overall, it was certainly challenging. So my partner, my wife was also working part-time. So I did childcare in the morning until lunchtime. Or early afternoon, and then she would take over after that. She would work in the mornings, and then I would work afternoons and the evenings. And so in terms of, still having to, do a full-time job when playing half the day can be challenging, but I wouldn't
anything.
give it up or trade it for anything. Honestly, those were some of the best memories of the PhD. Like, who else, gets to go swimming in the morning, because we live in California, so you can swim if you want. Who gets to go swimming in the morning or go playing on the playground, rediscovering your own childhood before you have to, go sit in front of a laptop for the rest of the day. When you're writing your dissertation, everything's kind of ephemeral. It's like, just meandering your way through the dissertation. At least that was my experience. And then when we had, our little girl and you're holding her in your arms, you're like, oh, wow, I need to actually, do something with my life to give you a chance of being some type of a normal human here.
Yeah.
So it gave a lot of purpose as well. And then joy, you're writing and you're bored. You walk out and you see her laughing, and then, your day is made.
Makes it all worth it. Carrying on from that, I'm going to plant a seed in your mind that I don't know if it's already planted or not. I know that your wife came with you at least once to Jaffa.
That's correct.
Yeah, to excavate. So do you think that there's any plans in future to bring the whole family on excavation with you if you can?
That would certainly be my goal. Yeah. So Kate did get to excavate with me for a summer working in Jaffa. And I'd have to say, of the archaeology career path, that has certainly been for me by far the hardest, is going and excavating overseas. And, the summers where she wasn't able to come. And we actually had one summer where I had to go excavate and leave my daughter here as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that was certainly by far one of the hardest things that I've had to do. So in the future, our goal is, during an excavation season, we'll all go together.
It'd be so exciting to have your kids on site.
I think so. Yeah, I'd be a little more confident if they're a little bit bigger, so they know to avoid scorpions and the like. So I think it'll be really fun and really exciting.
Be a great experience for your kids too, to like be able to learn about like other cultures and stuff like that from like such a young age.
Totally. Have them speaking Arabic, before they're fluent in English, I think would be rather hilarious.
The next two favorite questions actually that I ask people: what is your best and worst field experiences?
But I have to say the best field experience is probably what you alluded to previously. Having my wife be able to work with us in the field was by far one of the coolest things for me, to be able to show, all the intricacies of what the archaeological world entails, and, discover new things together with them. Probably one of the more painful experiences was I got stung by a scorpion in my thumb in 2017. And that was hands down probably one of the most horrible things. Just the pain. It felt like someone stabbed, a knife through my thumb, and then you can feel the pain and the paralysis creeping up your arm as you go to the clinic to get your antidote, or the scorpion antivenom, or whatever it's called. So that would probably be one of the worst experiences.
How did you manage to get it stung by a scorpion?
I was foolish and wasn't following the instructions we'd given the students. And I wasn't wearing gloves, and I jumped into an excavation area to help with something, and I reached somewhere I shouldn't have. And I received in kind what we would expect. Don't be like me. Wear your gloves.
Too much of a cowboy, Andrew.
Or you won't be able to use your hand for the next few days. One of the funny parts is when I couldn't like really use my hand. And the first feeling I got back was the ability to do this. So all of the students called it the claw.
Next is, what's your favorite thing? Can be an object, can be a site, can be whatever, that you've discovered or found.
I'll have a few candidates I'll submit to you. One would be on my birthday, very early on, I maybe 2010. When we were working together at Medania. Perhaps I don't quite remember what year it was, but I remember it was my birthday and we were excavating, and I found a nearly complete Iron Age lamp. And it just felt like a little sign. It was very beautiful. Also, and this will be probably one of the more boring things to most people, but one of the things that's always a hit is when you find bedrock, when you find the bottom of the excavation area. And so in, one summer when I was working and we were excavating, a living surface and all of the occupational debris on top of it, we excavated through that, within a little house, and then, another living surface with occupational debris. And then beneath that, we found the bedrock. And so what this meant was we could essentially tell the whole story of this area from earliest to latest, because we had this whole occupational sequence. And so I'd have to say, when we have moments like that where you can finally stitch together the entirety of the narrative, then the satisfaction you get from that is really can be quite profound. Being able to see the bigger picture of what you're working on, or how, your site connects to another site, which periods relate to which period is really, really quite impactful. And now that's, where I get my archaeology high.
Nice. Keeping all this stuff that we've talked about in mind, what would you say to inspire and encourage future archaeologists to follow in your footsteps?
Archaeology is beautiful. If you are intrigued by archaeology, certainly do pursue it. If you do choose to go the academic road of archaeology, do your research and ensure that you're aware of, what types of careers you could really translate your archaeological research into, whether this is specifically within academia or transitioning into the museum world or heritage studies or different forms of public awareness, or there's many different directions you can go. And also reach out to different people. If there's, a master's program or a PhD program you're interested in pursuing, reach out to, the advisor you might work with, talk to them. See if you can, arrange a coffee meeting or a Zoom meeting, and or reach out to some of their students. Very often, if you reach out to some, students in the program you're looking at applying, they can give you a really insightful full look into, what that PhD program, master's program, what that world of archaeology for them might look like. And then you can see and, use this to help navigate the path you want to look in, or you want to take as you look into this as a career option. Another thing I would encourage you to do, and something that I wish I would have done more of, before I went all the way through the PhD process, would be to look into and get involved in, whatever local heritage societies or whatever local museums you have around you. No matter where you are in the world, no matter what period you're working on, it can be really, really interesting, and you'll be surprised, at what you might really find that you're passionate about. So for example, I work in the ancient Near East. I love Mesopotamia, the Levant, Egypt. But, I'm also perhaps not equally passionate, but super passionate about, like Mayan history. I'm trying to build that into some courses that I'm teaching right now, what's happening in the Mayan world, but also, what's happening, where we grew up in Southern Ontario during the War of 1812, for example. Going to different museums and heritage festivals and stuff where you can learn about that and contribute and, build up more knowledge of the past in many different ways. So I'd encourage you, think broad, think big, and just follow all your passions. Do look into what, public outreach or public facing options there are, because this is really one of the areas in which archaeology can also improve, is in being, more public facing. And, this deals with a lot of what you also do, Rachel, in, through this YouTube channel and your other work as well, in translating, I guess, what we do in archaeology into a way that can be consumed and is meaningful for, people who might not have the same background in archaeology. And so, being that liaison between the two can be a really, really significant part of, promoting awareness of the significance and importance of, the study of the past.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's a great answer. Great answer. That's the end of all the questions I have for today. So once again, thanks for coming on. And it's been great chatting to you as it always is, and catching up and hearing all of these kind of stories that I don't get to hear anymore because we don't take class together.
It's been a delight being interviewed by you on your show. I'm so happy to be able to participate and contribute in that way. Thank you.
Okay, so that's everything, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Andrew. I know, as with all of my interviews, I really enjoy doing these and just catching up with my friends and learning a little bit more about their research and their professional lives. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please put them in the comment box below. If you liked this video, give us a thumbs up. If you would like to see more videos from me, please subscribe and hit the bell notification button. My social media is down below if you want to follow me there. I've also put Andrew's Twitter there if you're interested in following him as well. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye!